My name is Josephat Wanjagi, an engineer turned farmer and a little passionate about cherry farming, amongst other things. Now, did you know that you can measure the heat or the strength of cherry from 0 to 2.4 million on the Scoville heat unit? That essentially explains my huge interest in cherry farming, and this is my story. I would actually not say that I did something and then went into agriculture, because I started agriculture when I was a small boy, because my dad was a farmer. So we've been brought up, educated through farming. So what I can say, I've always had a lot of interest in farming, in growing things also, not just in farming as an enterprise, in growing things, in putting a seed in the ground, in finding it, in looking at it sprout, get up from the soil, and to that point when it produces fruits. So that whole process, that whole, let's call it creative process, has always been very interesting to me. I'm not trained as a farmer though, so I trained as an engineer to start with, and later I trained as a supply chain professional. So I can say I'm more as a supply chain guy with an engineering background, but now practicing as a farmer. What I was looking for, when I started getting my hands literally dirty in farming, is something that can move fast, because as you realize, most of the agricultural commodities are highly perishable. So you want something that can move fast in the market, something that people are eating daily. And that's why I got into different crops, tomatoes, capsicums. I've done onions also. And then one of my favorites is actually cherry. And right now I'm doing 2 varieties of cherry. I want to do a little bit more on cherry, so I'll probably introduce a 3rd variety. But right now what I have on the farm is Caribbean cherry and African bird's eye, or what some people refer to as red demon. The reason why I chose cherry is because if you look at African bird's eye, for example, it is something that, apart from there being a constant demand, so we actually cannot satisfy the market in Kenya today. There's a very, very huge export market. So that's one reason. You're able to sell it green and ripe. So we sell it as red demon, which is ripe, and when it is green. So which means that if your main harvest, your main product is green, if it happens to overgrow, it becomes red, you still have a market for red. In fact, we sell the red at a slightly higher price than the green. That reason for bird's eye is if for some reason you miss an order, you can actually dry it. So it's much easier to dry than, for example, say tomatoes, cabbages, or anything like that. Now for Caribbean cherry, which is Super Habanero, the variety that I planted is Super Habanero. There is somebody who was looking for a producer. So somebody had a market for it. They were looking for a producer. He's a fellow farmer actually, whom we collaborate with. So they came through the farm and asked me, by the way, could you do habaneros for me? So I said, okay, I've never heard about habanero, but let me try it. So I did some research finding out what is habanero. Then I decided, let me try it. So And surprisingly, the person I was planting for is not the person I'm selling most of the chili to. So the market is huge. Because I discovered there is a huge export market for habaneros. One of my customers used to get most of their habaneros from Uganda. So you can imagine them being able to collect it from a location like this, which is not so far from the airport, is a big plus for them. So I cannot even satisfy the demand for habaneros with the experimental volume that I have. So I'm actually going to extend my production for habaneros, and I've got other people who are more interested in growing it actually. So what really stands out about chili farming from a production perspective is that it's hassle-free. It's not as attractive to pests like most other crops. That's number one. And number two, it stays longer in the field than most of the other agricultural crops, because you can basically harvest it from up to 6 to 9 months, so to speak. And you see something like red demon, for example. Once you've harvested, that it looks as if it's coming to the end of life, you go and trim the shoots at the bottom, and then it is going to shoot all over again. So you trim the shoots at the bottom, then you stimulate the plant, you apply manure or whatever nutrition that you need to apply, and then the thing is going to shoot up afresh, and you're going to have a fresh crop. So it's much easier, from my experience, to cultivate than most other horticultural crops. And that's one of the things I really like about chili. So based on my experience, if you want to embark on chili farming, and if I talk specifically about Caribbean chili or habanero, with something like 50,000 shillings, you can actually be able to set up an eighth of an acre pretty well. Everything, including the seeds, including preparing the land, cultivation, the seeds, the drip lines, the mulching paper, the sowing, the planting. It takes you about 4 months from the time you sow to the time you plant. I need to mention that for chilies, it's normally much better for you to sow the seeds in a nursery first. You can either propagate yourself in a nursery first, or you can get people like Plantech, who are established propagators, to do it for you. Once you have planted, you have transplanted from the nursery onto your beds, then it takes somewhere about 120 days for the crop to be ready, with the first fruits. Now, those 4 months, you basically need to give the right care that you give during the early growing and vegetative period in terms of nutrition. So you need to think about fertilizers which are high on phosphorus when you're planting. You need to think about fertilizers which are good on nitrogen during the vegetative period. And you need to think about fertilizers which are high on potassium when you're coming to fruiting. That ensures that you get a nice, healthy first fruit, because what you're looking for is weight, because you sell these chilies by weight, by kgs. Now, after the first 4 months that you start harvesting, you can harvest roughly about 1.2 tons a month, because you can do something like 600 kilos. If your crop is well taken care of, you can do something like, and you can keep harvesting for up to 6 to 8 months after that. That is one of the beauties of chiri. It's not something that you put on the shamba and very soon you have to replace it with something else. And if you look at the returns, they're good returns, because on average you can sell a kilo of Caribbean chiri for between 120 shillings to 150 shillings. And if you get a really good export customer, you can sell it even for much more. Now, there are two ways that you basically start when you're thinking about what to plant. You ask, you can ask, do I have a market? Or do I need to establish the market first? Then I come and start planting whatever I want to plant. Now, all you can say, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to plant a small quantity, and then using that small quantity, once I see how the market is, I'm going to expand my production. To be honest, personally, I prefer the latter option. Why? Because a lot of times, for you to get the market, you have to show a sample of what you're producing to your potential customer. So if you don't have it, what are you going to show? And that has been my experience. So I started, fortunately I had an indicative customer, somebody who had expressed interest and so on and so forth, but had not committed that they'll be taking what I'll produce. And so when I realized that there might be a market for Caribbean chiri, I decided, let me do a small quantity. Now when I did a small quantity, I was able to take my sample to several other different customers. And now I'm supplying not one person, but to several people, and I cannot even meet the demand. So you really don't have to be tied up by waiting to get a market, to establish a market. Farming is about taking risks. Just make sure that they are calculated risks. Don't go and plant your whole 4 acres on something that you don't have a market for. But certainly starting with an eighth of an acre is a risk worth taking, because you need the samples for you to be able to take to your potential customers. Some of the challenges, for example, and it's not very common, but some of the challenges that I've come across in terms of production is you want to make sure that you're able to harvest as frequently as the customers requires you to harvest. But remember, the pests don't know that. And there is something we call pre-harvest intervals. So you have to know what chemicals do I apply which are safe enough for consumption for you to maintain the required pre-harvest interval for the customer. And that is something, that's one of the things that, so it's a challenge, but then you need to understand what pests to apply and what frequency to apply them at. So that's one of the things. And also you try to do as much as possible integrated pest management. So there are things that you can do on the farm that reduces your exposure to pests. In terms of IPM, one of the things that we do is use, we call them biotraps for insects, for whiteflies and thrips. You will not see them right now on the farm because we don't have a big problem with the pests at this moment. So you not find them. Of course, the other thing that we try to make sure that we maintain is basic hygiene on the farm. That is very key for integrated pest management, because a lot of pests tend to thrive in very dense weeds. So you have a very dense vegetation in terms of weeds. It tends to encourage production of pests. So you try to keep the farm as clean as possible. And also one of the other challenges we faced initially when we were starting, if you look at the farm, you will see we have sticks on the ground. Why we did that, Initially when we were planting, because it was the first time that we were doing Caribbean cherry, I did not expect that the stems would be breaking from the weed. And sometimes it gets very weedy here. So we lost quite a bit of stems. That stem is normally very heavy with fruits. So before we knew that, we have to come and do staking. So I think it's important when you're starting, if you know a farmer who is doing the same crop, to try and pay a visit to that farmer, because they are probably going to tell you things that you need to do that you don't know, and things you not read in any book. You don't know you're only going to know them through his experience, that other farmer's experience. So that's something that we learned. So we've staked everything. If you look at the Caribbean cherry, you see it's got stakes. If you look at the red demon, it doesn't have, because it's stronger. So the shoots are much stronger than for Caribbean cherry. The last challenge is sometimes if you have mixed up communication, especially with exporters, you can find yourself harvesting and the exporter does not pick your crop. Because if it happens that they actually have not confirmed the order, then they cannot export it, because there's no plane load that is going at that point. So one of the things that I've learned very early on is to make sure that you confirm and double confirm the order, so that you don't harvest something that is perishable and then you don't have anybody to pick it up. I know that the market is huge. I'm actually not able to satisfy the market today. The production costs are not that high. So my plan is that I'm actually going to expand my acreage that is on cherry. So this was experimental. Like I said, the experiment has succeeded. So we're going to increase the acreage of both Caribbean cherry. What I'm planting now is one variety of Caribbean cherry, which is red Caribbean cherry. There is a different variety, which is yellow when ripe. It's possible that I'm going to introduce that also, just to increase the variety a bit, because sometimes customers ask for the other variety. Though the one that I've seen with a much higher demand is the red one. And the other thing that I did want to do is to develop our expertise on cherry even more. So I'm thinking of at least one more additional type of cherry, which has got a good market, both in Kenya and for export. In about a year's time, I probably have something like at least 4 acres on cherry. So right now I have a total of just over a quarter acre on cherry. But it's something that I can be able to scale up a bit, and I think I'll be able to do that in the future. That's my story as a cherry farmer. Are you passionate about what you're doing? Is it farming? Share it so that we can all learn.